Hello everyone, so you are going to complete your review guide today, and keep in mind your test is on Friday, so test Friday. Now, for the first set of problems, you are going to look at signs or evidence that a chemical change has happened. If you do not remember what the signs of a chemical change are, you are going to go to the Unit 5 Chemical Reactions folder in Schoology. Then you're going to click on the first document that says Unit 5 Objectives, Reg Chem. Go to 5-2, and here are the 5 signs of a chemical change. You need to memorize these, okay? So memorize them. You will also have to apply them. So for example, if I said 2 substances were put together and they started bubbling, you would know it was a chemical change because bubbles, right, fizzing, gas was made. If I said a piece of paper was cut, you would determine that that's just a physical change because none of the 5 signs of a chemical reaction happened. If I said that I mixed something blue and yellow together and they made green, you would determine that that's a physical change because you would expect those colors to make green, okay? Like red and yellow make orange, okay? But if it's like a color that you did not expect, something clear and something red form yellow, then that is a chemical change. Next, for number 2, circle the reactants. Keep in mind that's what you start with. Square the products. That's what you end with. Then label coefficients and subscripts. I have some coefficients labeled here, but not all. Coefficients are the large numbers out in front. Subscripts. Subscripts are the small numbers to the right of an element symbol. Here, there is H2. So there are 2 H's, not 2 O's, 2 H's. And that 2 is a subscript. So go ahead and finish labeling all the coefficients, subscripts, products, and reactants. Then for number 3, you have particle pictures that represent a balanced equation, and you have a balanced equation using chemical formulas. You can either circle and square the particle pictures or the balanced equation. So you're going to circle 2 reactants and then box 2 products. When you're looking at coefficients, remember that if there's no number out in front, it means 1. For subscripts, if there's no number to the right of that element symbol, that means 1. Lastly, you're counting the number of atoms for each element. So look at the reactant side and the product side. I have an example for you in the product side. So carbon, there's no number to the bottom right-hand side. So no number means 1. I put a 1 here. Now, how many atoms do I have? Well, I'm going to take my subscript, my 1, times my coefficient, 3, equals 3. That's how many atoms I have. Please write down this formula here. Subscript times coefficient equals number of atoms. And you can pause the video to stop and look at this formula. Next, for 4 and 5, you are going to write or circle whether your formula is balanced or not balanced. So go ahead and do the same thing that you did for letter E. Do your subscript times your coefficient, and that'll give you the number of atoms you have. For 5, you are looking at particle pictures. So it does not mean that I need to have the same type of substance on both sides. It does mean that I need to have the same number of each color on both sides. So if I have 2 clear circles on the left, I should have 2 on the right. And then circle balanced or not balanced. For 6A through E, you are going to have to create your own RAP table. So I have an example here. Go ahead and update your atom inventory and then balance your equation. For 7, you have a balanced equation for sandwiches. This is the same idea that we did with s'mores, but this time we just have sandwiches instead. So every letter or set of letters in parentheses represents our chemical formula. So for example, for our s'mores, we said that one s'more equals or represents 1 SM. Okay, so that's our chemical formula. But here for bread, it's represented by B. So let's do a sample problem. 7A. If 8 slices of bread B were used, how many sandwiches could you make? Let's start with what we have, 8B. Then we're going to bring down the letter B. Why? Because I'm trying to cancel it out. And I have an example here. So B times 1 over B equals B over B. And B over B equals 1. This is the same idea as when we have numbers. Okay, so we're just replacing our numbers with letters. And it does the same thing. Then, what are we trying to figure out? How many sandwiches we have? Well, our chemical formula for our sandwiches is here. So I'm going to write that down. And my numbers for my fraction are actually going to come from my balanced equation. Same idea as with the s'mores, right? So how many pieces of bread do I have in my equation? 2. So I wrote down 2. How many sandwiches does that make? 1. So I put down 1. Now I'm going to have you go ahead and solve. Then do B, C, and D. One note for D. So if you need to make 56 sandwiches, how many pieces of bread do you need? How many slices of ham? How many slices of cheese? So you're going to do this equation 3 times. 1 time for bread, 1 time for ham, another for cheese. How are you going to start? Well, you have 56 sandwiches. I put my chemical formula here for sandwiches, and then I bring that same chemical formula down to the bottom because I want to cancel it out. Then what am I solving for? The number of bread. And then later on, it'll be ham slices. And then later on, it'll be cheese slices. Okay, but this one is bread. And then I'm going to look at my balanced equation. How many pieces of bread do I have in order to make 1 sandwich? And I'm going to write those numbers down in my fraction. Then, number 8, how many of each particle do you have? I have 1, 2, 3 of this particle, 3. I have 1, 2 of this particle, 2. So I wrote those down. Go ahead and finish the rest. For number 9, I have a balanced equation. Based on the balanced equation, how many of each chemical formula do I have? So here it says moles. Don't stress over that. It's just the unit we use to represent coefficients. So how many ALs do I have? I have 2, so I wrote that down. How many H2s do I have? I have 3. I wrote that down. A, how many moles of H2 are produced if 6 moles of Al reacted? Well, I'm going to start with what I have, which is 6 moles of Al. If you write 6 moles of Al, that's perfectly fine. That's what's on the answer key. But if you don't, I will not penalize you for it. Just write 6Al. Same idea as when we would write 1SM for s'more. Okay, so 6Al, and then I'm going to bring Al down to the bottom because I want to get rid of it. What am I solving for? What am I trying to get? The amount of H2. So I'm going to put H2 at the top. Then, based on my balanced equation, that's what's going to go in my fraction. So how many H2s are in my fraction? How many ALs are in my fraction? Let's see. I have 3 H2s in my fraction, and I have 2 ALs in my fraction. That's what I'm going to write down. And then I'm going to solve. Go ahead and solve for A through C. Lastly, I have for number 10, particle pictures, and I have balanced equations for my particle pictures. So how many moles of each substance do I have? Well, this particle, I only have 1. This particle, I have 2. So I'm going to write those numbers down, finish the rest. For A, how many moles of this particle are produced if 5 moles of this particle reacted? Well, what do I start with? 5 moles of this particle. Again, you can write moles, but if you don't, I will not count it against you. So here I'm going to write 5 of this particle here. And then I'm going to bring that same particle down to the bottom just to cancel out that unit. Same idea as with s'mores, right? If we had so going back to the s'mores. So if I had here 24 mm, I'm going to bring that unit down and I'm going to put mm. What am I trying to solve for? Graham crackers. So I'm going to put GC on top. Now, how many GCs do I need in my balanced equation? Or do I have? I have 2 GCs. How many MMs do I have in my balanced equation? 1. So it's the same idea, okay? So what you have here goes at the bottom, and what you need to solve for goes on the top. Then, in this problem, what do I need to solve for? I need to solve for this particle. So I'm going to put it at the top, and then based on my balanced equation, how many of each do I have? Ignore this. We're not going to pay attention to that. So I have 2 of this substance, so I'm going to write that down. And I have 1 of this substance, so I'm going to write that down. Now, when I solve, I multiply across, and I divide the bottom. So 5 times 2 equals 10, divided by 1 equals 10. So I get 10 of this substance. Go ahead and solve A through C. There is one more paper at the bottom or at the end of your packet. Go ahead and try those problems as challenge. And you're going to determine the products. All right, just a reminder, your test is on Friday. You should be able to complete this review guide by the end of the block.